Xia Baolong, head of Beijing's Hong Kong and Macau office, visits the community today. President Xi Jinping welcomes Brazilian leader Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to China. Hello and welcome to TVB News. The director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, Xia Baolong, embarked on a tour today to better understand Hong Kong firsthand. He had breakfast at a dim sum restaurant and talked to senior citizens at a community center. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Marking the second day of his visit to the SAR, Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office Director Xia Baolong started the day in Hong Kong style. Accompanied by Chief Executive John Lee and Hong Kong Liaison Office Director Zheng Yanxiong, Xia arrived at the Skyline Tower in Kowloon Bay for a dim sum breakfast at around 8 a.m. The mainland official stayed for over an hour. Several locals said Xia took the initiative to sit next to them in order to have more interaction. This woman said Xia was passionate when greeting the restaurant goers, and she felt that he was down to earth. Lawmaker Bell Tang praised Xia's sense of humor, adding that the HKMAO director wished to encourage and listen more to the grassroots of the city. He quotes Xia as saying local communities are the body of the SAR, and the two should not oppose one another. Xia's group then made its way to a district health center near Shek Kip Mei to better understand Hong Kong's grassroots medical facilities. Then he went to a social services center at Shum Shui Po, where he stayed for half an hour and left after thanking a traffic patrol team made up of elderly volunteers. This volunteer at the center said Xia was very friendly. Just before noon, the HKMAO director visited a Federation of Trade Unions community facility, where he was welcomed by the union leaders. Today is the second day of Xia Baolong's visit to Hong Kong. After meeting with senior officials yesterday, Xia spoke to members of the community this morning during visits to the Shum Shui Po District Health Center and the Federation of Trade Unions Workers Club in To Kwa Wan. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
In the afternoon, Xia Baolong visited the Court of Final Appeal and the Justice Place. He also met with Hong Kong's representatives in Beijing's top political bodies. Xia Baolong was welcomed at the entrance of the Court of Final Appeal by Chief Justice Andrew Chung and Secretary for Justice Paul Lam. Xia stayed at the premises for around 2 hours before he went to Justice Place, where he met with the Law Society representatives. He then arrived at the liaison office accompanied by Chief Executive John Lee, where he met with Hong Kong deputies of the National People's Congress, including Standing Committee member Starry Lee, as well as members of the CPPCC. Sources said Xia will visit the Legislative Council and have lunch with lawmakers on Sunday. And starting from Sunday, eligible members of the public can collect the first phase of a new round of consumption vouchers worth $3,000. On top of that, the public transport fare subsidy will also be available on the same day. However, the government said individuals who wish to collect their voucher using the Octopus Card may not be able to get the full amount in one go. Mimo Sangai with more.
For many people, the weekend is the best part of the week as there's often something to look forward to. One thing the public can get excited about this coming Sunday is the collection of $3,000, the first phase of a new round of the government's consumption voucher. About 6.4 million people are eligible for the latest round of the voucher scheme. There are two phases. On Sunday, eligible individuals can collect $3,000. The remaining voucher, $2,000, will be available on July 16th at the earliest. Octopus Card users are required to spend all of their $3,000 by the end of June to qualify for the second phase. Howard Lee, head of the Financial Secretary's private office, said the deadline for residents to collect their $3,000 is the end of September. Meanwhile, public transport fare subsidy will also be released on the same day. Lee, however, said people will not be able to receive $3,000 in full if they have decided to collect the subsidy first. This is due to the Octopus Card stored value limit is currently set at $3,000. Mingmon's 9, TVB News.
President Xi Jinping has met with visiting Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. It's the third day of Lula's state visit to China. The two leaders are set to have a meeting and dinner with each other. Jackie Lin tells us more.
Outside the Great Hall of the People, President Xi Jinping and First Lady Peng Liyuan received Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and his wife Rosângela da Silva with much pomp and circumstance. It's understood Beijing hopes Lula will let Brazil join the China-led Belt and Road Initiative, while Lula will express wishes for Xi to help push for a resolution to the Russian-Ukraine conflict, as well as more investment in Brazil by Chinese companies. Expected to sign at least 20 bilateral agreements, the pair are set to have talks that could mark a reset in relations since Lula took over from his far-right predecessor Jair Bolsonaro in January. After that, Lula headed to Tiananmen Square to lay flower wreaths at the monument to the people's heroes. Stop Lula made a Huawei Technologies research center. The Chinese telecom company has been allowed to supply equipment for Brazil's 5G network rollout, despite bans by the U.S. and a number of other countries. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
In the U.S., a Massachusetts Air National Guard was arrested in connection with the disclosure of highly classified military documents about the Ukraine war and other top national security issues. Tracy Furness has more.
Up of 20 to 30 young people with interests in guns, military gear and video games. U.S. officials had been hunting for weeks for the person responsible and assessing the damage from the release of the intelligence reports. The leaks appeared on social media sites from late last year to March, revealing details of U.S. and NATO military supplies to Ukraine, Ukrainian military vulnerabilities, and information about U.S. allies, including Israel, South Korea, and Turkey. One document, according to the BBC, discussed how UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is too willing to accommodate Russian interests. The UN responded.
The Secretary General is not soft on any one country or another. On the conflict in Ukraine, he has been very clear about the violations of international law, very clear about the violations of the Charter. He says the same thing when he's in Moscow, when he's in Kyiv, when he's in New York.
Tejera will appear in a court in Boston Friday.
Coming up, Mary Quant, a revolutionary designer from the 1960s, dies at age 93. Message from Antarctica from a young Hong Kong climate advocate. The 12th day of national strikes took place across France as those opposed to Emmanuel Macron's pension reform continue to try to turn the tide on the policy. David Garrett reports.
Beneath the July column at the Place de la Bastille, the protests seem calm, but on the ground a standoff breaks down. Riot police charge forward. In another part of this famous square, usually frequented by tourists, more trouble. Protesters bait and boo officers who try to break up crowds. One youth slaps an officer who then chases him and a brawl breaks out, pushing and shoving. The cameraman gets caught up in the disturbance. Punches and insults are thrown before calm is restored. This was the 12th day of protests against President Emmanuel Macron's plan to raise the pension age from 62 to 64. A pinch point for frustration was the Constitutional Council, known for its stone columns obscured here by heavy police presence. The council will decide whether to amend or even strike down Macron's reform. Protesters headed there hoping to sway the members. The council rarely rejects laws entirely, only once in 60 years, but they'll decide if it fits within the French constitution. The Interior Ministry said overall numbers on the streets across France in the last 2 weeks have fallen from 3 million to several 100,000. Rennes in the northwest has been one of the cities outside of Paris that has seen the worst violence. Water cannon was again used on demonstrators as garbage was set on fire in the street. But most of those on the streets were young and appeared good-natured, singing and dancing. Trade unions are also piling on the pressure. Rail workers were on strike again as picket lines moved through Paris's busiest station. But the Paris Metro ran more smoothly than on previous strike days. This union rep says if they're looking for solutions to finance pensions, it is a simple solution. It is to take from the pockets of billionaires. His group had moved on to the iconic Louis Vuitton headquarters. 100 protesters were seen at the entrance hall of the building, climbing an escalator, lighting flares on the upper floors and waving flags of the railway union Sud Rail. David Garrett, TVB News.
In other news, Mary Quant, the British designer whose fashions epitomized the swinging 60s in London, has died at the age of 93. Mary Quant was a visionary designer who was instrumental in the 1960s mod and youth fashion. The London-based designer popularized the miniskirt, which she named after her favorite car, the Mini. The hemlines were up to 8 inches above the knees, considered shocking at the time. She also created hot pants in the 1970s. Quant was an astute businesswoman and was one of the first to brand herself, such as in her cosmetic line. Some compared her impact in the fashion world with that of the Beatles' impact on pop music. Quant's family said she died peacefully Thursday at home in Surrey, a county south of London. U.S. President Joe Biden addressed the Irish Parliament on Thursday as he continued his tour of the Emerald Isle. During his speech, he heralded the strong bilateral ties between the U.S. and Ireland. Daniel Rowell tells us more.
Holding up his own family history as an example, US President Joe Biden told lawmakers in a packed Parliament building that the story of Irish immigrants setting sail for the US is at the heart of what binds Ireland and America together. Biden also stressed the importance of economic ties and a united front on the war in Ukraine.
Our history reminds us, our history, ours, yours and mine, reminds us of the responsibilities we have to the president, that should be the president, to the hopes of our ancestors, to the expectation of future generations. Because we know what it means to fight for democracy. Today, Ireland and the United States are standing together to oppose Russia's brutal aggression and support the brave people of Ukraine.
Biden said the United Kingdom should be working closer with Ireland to support Northern Ireland. This comes after he opened his trip earlier this week in Belfast, Northern Ireland, where he marked the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. The US brokered deal brought peace to a region of the United Kingdom where the Troubles left some 3,600 people dead in bombings and other attacks.
Political violence must never again be allowed to take hold on this island.
Rounding out a day of diplomacy, Biden celebrated the close ties between the United States and Ireland at an evening banquet at Dublin Castle. During the banquet, the Irish leader Leo Varadkar thanked Biden for his leadership on Ukraine. In response, Biden said he felt lucky to be in Ireland. Biden will wrap up his visit to Ireland today by travelling to County Mayo in the west of the country. That's where his great-great-grandfather lived until he left for the United States in 1850. Daniel Rowell, TVB News.
Back locally, since the landlord and tenant ordinance concerning subdivided flats was invoked at the beginning of last year, the government has identified over 1,500 cases of violation by March, but only 3 cases have been prosecuted. The vast majority of people involved in the cases have not been successfully prosecuted. Some LegCo members criticize the ordinance as lacking a deterrent effect. In response, the government said each case should be treated individually. A 25-year-old woman was chosen as the only Hong Kong representative to undertake a recent scientific expedition to Antarctica, alongside climate change experts and policymakers from around the world. Jackie Lin spoke with each climate change activist on what we can do to reverse the damage.
Chunks of icebergs breaking off from glaciers. Blooms of snow algae across the Antarctic coastline because of rising temperatures. And survival of baby penguins threatened by the loss of sea ice and more frequent gale force winds. These are pictures brought back from the South Pole by 25-year-old Natalie Chung.
It was a journey of a lifetime and also filled me with both fear and hope. Seeing and witnessing all these environmental changes in Antarctica, the place that no man inhabits, but how far-fetched are impacts on the southernmost part of the Earth.
Natalie was selected as a sole representative from Hong Kong to take part in a 12-day Antarctic climate expedition led by National Geographic Explorer-in-Residence Dr. Sylvia Earle. Alongside some 110 scientists, policymakers, and climate change activists from around the world, she traveled to the land of wind and ice in February, seeking solutions to reverse the trend of global warming. She also vows to spotlight the importance of Hong Kong and Asia in marine protection efforts.
Asia is definitely crucial in solving the ocean climate puzzle. We have 85% of the total world population relying on fishery, the fishery sector. They live in Asia. But a lot of the ocean startups or ocean technological innovations are not happening here yet.
So what first inspired Natalie to embark on this journey of climate change advocacy? It dates back to 15 years ago when she met Dr. Rebecca Lee, the first woman ever to have visited the North Pole, South Pole, and Mount Everest.
Natalie is a very persistent and determined young lady. It's a great thing to see a young person work on the important cause of climate change.
Natalie also inspired a new generation of climate change advocates, including Hermia.
She kind of demonstrated to me that young people from Hong Kong can also have the opportunity to speak at a global stage, influence policy, to influence how business and general public to see nature.
Natalie also told us her Antarctic experience will not end with her return to Hong Kong. She will continue to share what she saw, learned, and experienced in the expedition to different schools and organizations in Hong Kong and even across Asia, so as to raise awareness towards the pressing issues of marine conservation. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
And that's the news. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the weekend.